Hey everyone, I'm Will with StudentRoomStay, and in this video, we're diving into some of the culture shocks that students face when choosing to study abroad in the United States. Let's get into it. Culture shock is the feeling of a little disoriented when moving to a new environment such as America. This can manifest in various ways as you settle into your new surroundings. It can be the way Americans communicate with each other, the different foods found in grocery stores, or even the everyday things like weather and public transport. Being in a brand new culture can be slightly uncomfortable to begin with. A lot of Americans communicate very directly. This means that they will ask many questions or describe what they're thinking in a way that is clear and specific. If you're from another country that values indirect communication, you could interpret Americans' directness as rudeness, though that's not the case. You might also find that your host family is not skilled in interpreting your indirect communications. For example, let's say your host family asks you if you want to watch a television show that you don't like. To be polite, you agree to watch the show, but then discover that they expect that you'll watch every show every night of the week. When your host family discovers that you don't actually enjoy the show, they're upset. They might ask, why didn't you tell us? Or we would have happily watched the program if you enjoyed it. In this situation, both you and your host family were just trying to be polite. However, Americans will not be offended if you state your preferences clearly and directly, instead of expecting that they'll understand your nonverbal cues. When students study abroad, they are often surprised how friendly Americans are in different situations. Expectations to make small talk, otherwise known as informal chats, are common, both living with your host family and in social situations. For example, if you were brewing tea in your host family's kitchen and one of the hosts came in, and they might ask, "How's it going?" Rather than describing your feelings in detail, it'd be more appropriate to say, "Fine, how are you?" Americans may also make conversation about the weather, discuss local events, or comment on what's happening. For example, it's not uncommon to chat about the length of the line you're in at a supermarket. You should be ready for that kind of conversation. You might even make a new friend. Other visitors to the United States are often surprised by what's known as the American smile. Americans may smile more often than other cultures, especially in pictures. It would be considered rude in many contexts not to smile using their teeth. While these wide smiles may be perceived as extreme friendliness, American workers are often taught to smile widely when greeted to customers. Both in home and in the school context, you may be surprised how informal Americans treat their superiors or their elders. Specifically, there's no formal means of address in the American English as terms to respect for elderly family members. This informality doesn't mean that Americans disrespect those in authority to their elders, but rather than they want to establish a friendly relationship that focuses on honesty. Take, for example, a common situation with your host family. Your host family may suggest that you call them by their first names, though you may feel like you should call them Mr. or Mrs. as a sign of respect. However, this suggestion indicates that your host family wants to get to know you on a more personal, less formal level. If your host family doesn't tell you to address them specifically, feel free to ask. Also, remember that levels of formality differ from place to place. So, for example, if you grow accustomed to the friendliness of the American South, don't be surprised if residents of the West Coast aren't so open. The United States is a huge country and the cultural norms differ somewhat from region to region and place to place. Americans are direct and friendly, so you may assume that they're open in all aspects of their life. In fact, this is not the case. Americans are very private in many aspects of their life. First, Americans value their physical space. This means that while they might hug you hello in greeting, they prefer physical distance when having a conversation, sitting together, or standing in a line. Take, for example, your host mother. After she initiates a conversation, don't stand so close to her, as Americans can feel uncomfortable when they feel like others are invading their physical bubbles. This sense of privacy also manifests itself in topics of conversation. There's an old American adage that says to keep conversations polite, you should not discuss money, politics, or religion. This is certainly true. Americans also don't like talking about their weight, their health, or their age either. So try to avoid these topics in conversation unless they're brought up. Finally, Americans are very protective of their private space. While your host family will certainly have shared rooms and shared spaces, including the kitchen and the living room, you never want to use private items in those spaces. If you're unsure what you can use in these common spaces, just ask. In the same vein, you never want to encroach on Americans' private living areas like the bedrooms or private bathrooms. If for any reason they leave their purses or date books or journals in a common space, it would be seen as very disrespectful to look through and read those. After understanding a few of the culture shocks that foreign students face, hopefully you have a better idea of things to know about American culture. This is one of the pleasures of studying abroad, exploring the different ways of life. You can see what's normal to others as well as teaching them a few things about culture norms from where you live. They might just be surprised by your habits as you are theirs. Culture shock can be a real challenge, one that can make you feel like you don't even know how to behave properly in certain situations. This is one of the reasons that StudentRoomStay is so thorough in screening our host families. That way, we can make sure to find families who are compassionate in helping you understand your new environment. At StudentRoomStay, we are the better way to stay for international students. And if you want to stay in a StudentRoomStay hosted accommodation, click the links below and sign up today. Thanks for watching and have a great study abroad.